Today we're joined by Christian Gauthier. He's our fellow who he's a postdoc at the University of Pittsburgh who's helped manage the Kaufman program, and our SAB chair, Dr. Graham Hatfield, who's also here on the line with us as well. And we'll jump in with any questions, answering any questions at the end as well. It's great to be with you. I'm going to provide some background information about the Kaufman program. Many of you are likely familiar with the program as well, and interested in helping out your access to the foundation. For those who may have any kind of potential visual impairment, I'm a 54-year-old white male. I have short, dark hair, which is getting shorter by the year. I'm wearing a brown sweater over a blue button-down shirt, and I'm in my office. So there's some books and things like that behind me here as well. So we'll get started. Again, we have some housekeeping questions here. Taryn Lumley is working with us from our Center for Philanthropy and helping managing all the technology. If you have any questions, again, please put them in the chat. Auto captioning should be available for those in need. And if you have any questions or have any access issues, please just let us know in the chat as well. So the Kaufman program has been inspired by Mr. Kaufman himself, who started the fund here at the Pittsburgh Foundation in 2010 with the bequest from his work in his state. He worked as a chemical engineer who is loved to be outdoors, active member of the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy. So a portion of the fund actually gives to the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy directly as well. And he, just as an exceptional visionary, and wanted to really think about creating a dream of being able to support the innovative pursuit of fundamental scientific research in the fields of chemistry, biology, and physics. And he really felt very much in his humble way that he can accomplish much more through his estate, through his work and vision, through others, and supporting this work through Pennsylvania state institutions than he could ever accomplish on his own, which is why he created the fund. It's an incredible gift. And just so you all know, on our side, we really think of Mr. Kaufman and all the work and program and the scientific advisory board as they review the grants, applications, and LOIs that come in, really keep this mission and Mr. Kaufman's vision at the center of the work, and really our vision as well. So it's an incredible task and honor that we're all given to help create this access. He really believed that it all just takes a spark. That's really his vision too. And the mission of the foundation is to support fundamental research, again, in biology, chemistry, and physics. There is no flexibility around sort of other institutions. It really is about Pennsylvania-based work. And it's based on the Welch Foundation model, which is created out of the state of Texas. So the foundation distributes grants in 3 specific areas: new investigator research and new initiative research, and the IREG program, which is the Integrated Research and Education Grants Program as well. To introduce you to us, like you know who I am, Dr. Hatfield is on the line as well. You may see his picture up here, and it's in the upper right-hand corner for me. Christian, who just recently joined us, which is fantastic to have him part of the team, and he'll be helping on the scientific sort of management side. So should you become part of the program or apply, you'll likely have contact with Christian as well. And then Emily, who's on our side. From an advisory and guidance of the program itself, the Scientific Advisory Board, which you can find online if you search them for the Kaufman Foundation Scientific Advisory Board on our website, are a phenomenal group of researchers that help guide this work with the highest grade of ethics and expertise and humor and collegiality, and are just fantastic, really led by Dr. Hatfield. Overall, the foundation is led by the Kaufman Foundation Board of Directors, which oversee the administrative side of the foundation. Ultimately, the funding and processes and ratification of the grants is dependent on the Pittsburgh Foundation Board as well. So legally, we're responsible for managing the funds. And that's led by Lisa Schroeder, our president and CEO. Should you be online, please feel free to check out our launch of our new strategic plan, which just came out yesterday. So guidelines for the different areas, we're going to cover those. You can also find them really easily on our website at kaufman.pittsburghfoundation.org/guidelines. Should you look at those and have any questions, you have our contact information. If you get involved and would like to ask further questions, we are here to support you in your application to the program. So let us know how we can help. Also on our website, we list a variety of previous years and also this past year, all the different scientific awards that have been granted through the Kaufman Foundation funding. So it might be a good place to look to see what kind of research is going on, what kind of things have been funded, how people are characterizing some of that work in the different disciplines. And there's definitely an interest, particularly in the new initiative area of sort of interdisciplinary science as well too. So please check those out for some more information about who's been funded and where. So our new investigator grants are designed to support innovative scientists in Pennsylvania as they transition into academic positions in a new independent career. This is really about career launching, career trajectory. So proposals must address, again, a basic and fundamental science question, in the core areas of biology, physics, or chemistry, or at a disciplinary boundary between these fields, and then also present the work you're doing as well, right? I mean, if it doesn't, if you're kind of pushing a boundary that you think is really novel and innovative, that's where the Scientific Advisory Board will look at that work and research for its highest, level of rigor, and because that's a priority here, but then also be able to look for alignment within the Kaufman Fund. Applied or clinical studies are not supported at this time. This is really about supporting fundamental science. We have lots of other funding structures out there. That's not to say that that work isn't important, but that's really not the core purpose for the for Kaufman. And they're up to 6 awards maximum at $150,000 a year over 2 years, so $75,000 a year. A lot of common questions. I'll probably say this a few times. Really funds very little indirects here through this work. So this is really about direct support for the research as well. There's really no flexibility. Many of your institutions are going to ask for more than 10% indirects. Kaufman Foundation can't do that. So that's really the cap. The new initiative grants, the goal is to stimulate here in established investigators to establish new collaborations in their work. Often, what does a new collaboration mean? It means that there is a relationship there, there's lots of work going, but if you're applying, potentially looking to apply to Kaufman to just continue some of the work you've been doing and maybe have received external funding for in the past, that may not be as competitive as trying to help, create and spark and catalyze a new partnership in some of those areas too. So this is really about launching those new investigations in a field together. Investigators may be from different institutions in Pennsylvania or at the same institution, provided that the different approaches combined are really clear within the new initiative work. Proposals are required again to address fundamental pure sort of foundational science in physics, biology, and chemistry, or at the boundaries, but not applied science in that way as well. We know that there's a growth into that applied science space, so we welcome the conversation and welcome the debate and discussion. So please, help us learn in that process. For the new initiative grants, they're a little larger. So there are 4 awards at a maximum every year of $300,000 over 2 years. That's $150,000 per year. And then there's the integrated research and education grants. These had involved more recently, and they're designed to provide support for research focused on direct engagement of undergraduate students alongside innovative scientists in fundamental science research in the areas of biology, physics, and chemistry. These are, again, smaller awards up to $100,000 over 2 years, and applications, again, must show an exhibit of this authentic hands-on research experiences with undergraduates with the expectation of leading to new discoveries. This is really designed to help some of the smaller institutions here in Pennsylvania that are doing great work in research, but may not be doing it at the level of some of our tier 1 institutions like Pitt, Carnegie Mellon, Penn State, and others. And so we wanted to make sure the Scientific Advisory Board and then the board also felt it was really important to provide an avenue for those institutions to access these funds and help spark new innovative research. So this program right now is by invitation only. There are many institutions that fit this category of scale and size. And so right now, we work through a rotation of those who have been previously invited, applied, maybe not funded, those who were new, and there's a cycle that is been somewhat informal to date. Over this year, we're going to work to formalize that process and be able to communicate what the invitation-only process looks like, and are always interested in your desire to reach out to us too. Okay. So we wanted to share with you, we conducted an evaluation that was pretty rigorous of the Kaufman Foundation that in 2020 that really used data up to 2019. So just to share with you a little bit of background, if you were on this webinar last year, you've seen this before too, and we'll likely replicate this process in the next 2 to 4 years to help us understand sort of a trajectory. Although we think pretty sure that COVID has thrown kind of a wrench into a lot of things. So we're trying to think about how to best conduct that evaluation. But also we're always conducting process evaluation and improvements for the program as well. Thinking about new strategies like this webinar, trying to use social media. We really want to get the word out. We want to make sure that people are hearing about Kaufman as a potential funding option here to support the innovative work that's happening in the state. So please feel free to share the Kaufman Foundation grant opportunities with your networks. And if people have questions, again, always let us know. So again, thinking about the trajectory of successful and rigorous research that's taking place, the goal here for Kaufman was to, one of the measures that we use is sort of where do people fit on the publication trajectory and the external funding trajectory. So we really looked at people's previous investigators' trajectory in that case to see pre-Kaufman and post-Kaufman. You can see the blue line that was pre-Kaufman. And when you look to see here, you can just sort of see a general trend that the publications that people were producing had gone up over that period of time. This is across the different grants programs. And so was excited to see some of that as well. We see some years that were higher, some years that were lower, and we know that there are many variables that fit into this trajectory as well. But just to kind of let you know, for previous Kaufman awardees, hopefully being able to leverage their experience and the flexibility of these funds to help them really launch their careers as well. You can see here the different overall research performances and areas that were funded by Kaufman over that grants period. You see a large amount sort of disproportionately in biochemistry, genetics, and molecular biology, physics and astronomy, chemistry and material science, and lots of other disciplines that fit into that as well. There's lots of, it's often we found in thinking about when we have the privilege of sitting in on the scientific advisory board discussions, even these unique categorizations, get blurred because of the different kind of disciplines that people are bringing to the work as well. But this lets you know sort of the spectrum of funding and where those areas of disciplines were of highest priority. That's not by importance, but that's where most of the funding has sort of gone by discipline. It's important to let you know in the scientific advisory board process and the review, there's a great deal of energy put into thinking about disciplinary breadth, the highest levels on the rigor of the science, and then alignment with the fund. But to think about is there equitable distribution around those three areas given Mr. Kaufman's priorities as well too. So there's a lot of discussion around parity, institution, and how that's working, and others, and really just a real ethical sound discussion that happens at the board level. So some survey findings that we had, because we asked directly from the investigators their experience as well. They really felt that the research they received significantly advanced their research career. It helped them both institutionally in terms of leverage, some flexibility, often being able to get additional student support and others, but then also being able to help them sort of more nationally and compete by developing preliminary findings and others that really help them launch their careers a little quicker than they may have thought. Since receiving their first round of foundation grant, the respondents said they received a range of external funding. Very few of them were zero, up to 750,000 or more. There were about 47 participants in the survey that participated in this as well. So you'd have the denominator here. That would be good science. 67% published the results of their foundation-funded research in scientific journals, which is great to see, and all would recommend the foundation to their program and colleagues. And I think that we've improved our level of technical assistance and support since the survey was conducted as a result of the findings that we heard too. For the new initiative awards, those are those interdisciplinary collaborative awards. They had received in general also significant external funding following their Kaufman Fund funding trajectory. You can see the large range, and then most respondents reported their grant funded also had significantly advanced their research career as well. And it helped attract other funding, but also other partners because of some of the publication and announcement of the work that came as well. And I wanted to get through that piece and just spend a little time. I can leave this here for you as well, just so you have our contact information. Again, Emily and I here at the foundation are your primary contacts for the Kaufman Foundation too. We do, again, manage all the grants management elements of the projects that come through, and happy to help through think through institutional sort of dynamics that come up, because there's always elements as well. Sorry, I have 3 screens going here. That hasn't happened before, so sorry I'm going back and forth on you. But wanted to share with you that should you be funded, we would really love for you to complete the survey results. We really kind of hounded people, so make sure to follow up on that side. Make sure to share this opportunity in a way, and make sure to help us know how we can better serve you sort of moving forward in the program as well. I'd like to welcome Taryn to unmute us. I have not been monitoring the chat because I've been talking a lot. Great. And you can read great. And if you have, Taryn, if you want to unmute the group, and maybe if you could raise your hand, that would be great. And we can make sure to maybe start calling on you one at a time. Dr. Hatfield, just want to welcome you also. If you'd like to share any comments, would welcome you to do that as well.
Thank you very much, Michael. I would just, I'll do just a similar recognition. I'm a white male, 65-year-old, and I'm sitting at home at the moment. So I have kitchenware behind me, I'm afraid, and not books, but I'm really delighted to be here today. Michael's comments were fantastic, and let me say a big thank you to Michael for all of your leadership in the program. And I will generally stay quiet unless there are specific questions that I might be able to help with, and I would be delighted to do so.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you so much. We will be posting these slides for your information. And if you had expected to come to the webinar and didn't hear what you expected, please feel free to ask that question now, or you could also send us an email. We're happy to follow up with you. This is sort of the soft launch of the Kaufman program for 2023. And you'll be seeing more information and more coming out from us too. New investigator and new initiative will be on their first cycle, and then IREG will follow on a separate cycle as well once people receive their invitations for the year. Carrie, do you have a question? Or Carrie?
Carrie, thanks.
Carrie.
Yes, so for the new initiative award, I'm curious if there is a preference for who is the primary PI, if it should be somebody who's more senior, or if it should be the person whose research is more a component. I mean, obviously it's collaborative, but is there really sort of a preference there for the co-PIs as to who is the primary one?
There hasn't been that indication in the past. I think it's really about part of the application is describing the relationship between the two and why that's important. But I wouldn't say that there's been a discussion in the previous reviews of this person's too junior or they haven't done that much. I will say that as some of the discussions, there's a balance between, oh, they've published 25 articles before and have had 2 R01s or something like that too. That generally is looked at not as a new initiative, right? Those are people who have been working together in a really significant way over time. But their research also might have taken a turn, in a new area that may be different as well. So it's hard to say like a 0-1 of what's right or wrong, but there's a sort of a balance. But this is really meant to spark and catalyze those new interdisciplinary partnerships, again, among investigators at research institutions. Welcome Graham's comments if you have any.
I think that's spot on. I would just say that obviously we would like to see that the PI is in a position in order to be able to provide the administrative aspects of leading the project, right? And but other than that, we will look at the qualifications of all of the PIs and co-PIs, and so yeah. I would just sort of second Michael's comments that I wouldn't be overly concerned about necessarily who that person is, but it should make sense, right? It should make sense to you, and it should make sense to us. But apart from that, that should be fine.
Yeah, and to let you know also, I mean, at least in terms of our background, I was in an academic setting for about 19 years and had done a lot of external grant writing and research as well. So I guess in terms of being direct, there's no eligibility criteria that this is sort of used as a scan or not. So out-of-state collaborators are not. It's really meant to be Pennsylvania institution partnerships to develop in that way. We've had some people try some interesting, they're outside institution faculty, but they have an adjunct in an institution within the state. It's really the primary appointment of the faculty member. And that's really to follow, I think, Mr. Kaufman's wishes based on his learning and real admiration for the Welsh Foundation programming to really help cultivate and create that kind of energy here within the state of Pennsylvania. We certainly see the interdisciplinary nature of the work that we do, and with the interweb as a joke and others, and how we're collaborating across all boundaries. But this was really Mr. Kaufman's wishes. So that's our job to follow those through. Any other questions? Am I missing anything or hands?
Michael?
Yes, please.
Hi, Michael. This is Sophie Penny from Penn State, and I'm in my office, and I am wearing a sort of tiger striped and black jacket today, and good to see you, and Emily.
Good to see you too.
I recall last year that you shared some information, I think I'm remembering this correctly, about the sort of general number of submissions you received from LOIs and how many, like what % might go to proposals, et cetera. Is that information you might have on hand that you could share again?
Yeah, what we'll do is we'll post up, or Emily, I don't know if you want to answer some of those in general. Go ahead, Emily.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily. I am a 28-year-old white female, and I am in the office of the Pittsburgh Foundation. There are some cupboards behind me. Dr. Leach, to answer your question, the decline rate for the new initiative and new investigator usually hovers around 75 to 83%, going from LOI to the full proposal stage.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you for that question too. We try to, we're really conscious of wanting to get as many applications and get as many people into this pipeline, because often there are, not often is a strong word, but there are some other funds here at the foundation that sometimes fit the applications that come in that aren't within the Kaufman boundaries that we're able to use. So again, a 25% acceptance rate from LOI to going to full proposal. In terms of numbers of applications that come in, it really varies in terms of numbers of LOIs that come in. Oh, and I see that there's a question from Jillian. Emily, I haven't seen the chat. For new investors, Jillian. To say higher degrees. I would say that that's a good question. I would say that because of COVID and others, feel free to reach out with those specific questions in terms of the eligibility criteria. Obviously, COVID is a little bit like El Nino. It has sort of sent everything sideways. So if there were any, if that trajectory, if you had expected to or might have thought you would finish it in an earlier year, but things had changed because of COVID, please feel free to reach out. That's a, the goal here is to promote really awesome science and to go forward in that direction. So if COVID, threw a wrench into that for some reason, we'd be happy to put a note into the application materials that we submit to the Scientific Advisory Board and provide that additional context at the meeting as well. Umit?
Hey, Michael and Emily.
Hi.
Thank you for the nice presentation. I'm wondering if there is a limitation about where the second person should be for the collaborative projects, like the same school, same department. Is there a rule that there is no go for the people in the same department if it is a mutual possibility?
I would say that, per the guidelines, it can be within the same institution. If it were in the same department, one of the questions I might have and I would expect might come up is how interdisciplinary is the work? I think it depends on the scope and range of work happening within the department. That would certainly come up. So it would be part of the application to really distinguish how is this new and novel research? And if you're in faculty meetings every week or month together, I'd wonder haven't you been working together before or something? But those are things you probably have to be able to, carefully address.
All right.
Certainly you could say funding is the reason that hasn't happened, but as long as it's really clear that it's interdisciplinary in that way. And Patrice is on deck, so I'll get you 1 second, but Graham, do you have any other thoughts on that?
I think that covers it. I guess, so there's no, other than being within Pennsylvania, that's the constraint, right? And departments obviously vary enormously.
Yep.
I'm in a department of biological sciences. I have ecologists and crystallographers and everything in between. And so it's easy to see how you can get very different approaches coming together in new projects. But if you're in a department of, the Department of Transcription Factors and Caenorhabditis elegans or something, ridiculously specific, then you're in the circumstance that Michael was describing, where that there may just not be the breadth there. And the constraint is not that you're in the same department. The constraint's that you really are not bringing sufficiently distinct approaches to come together with a new initiative that will spark a new area of science that would then lead to independent funding for the collaboration.
Yeah, and in terms of review process, just to share with you all, there's a primary reviewer from the Scientific Advisory Board, 2 or 3 secondary reviewers, and the board generally reviews all of the grants, and there's lots of really rigorous discussion about each one. So very much, a strong review from truly like-minded experts. If people don't have the disciplinary expertise, it's someone on the committee does and is able to provide that insight as well. And so often when there's 25 to 30 grants that come to the final review and only 6 to 8 or 6, may come up, for final funding, there's this we talk about the red line that continues to move. Does this go above the line or below the line based on who were the peers that had submitted at that time as well? This might be one of those criteria that might come in to say like, oh, it's really interesting, innovative science, but it's really aligned closely with the new investigator or new initiative award guidelines. So it would be just up to you all in the application to make that argument, why that's new and interdisciplinary. Like as Dr. Hetfield said, or Graham said, if it's a really big department, then you might actually never see each other, right? Because you're doing different work in different ways. Did that answer your question okay? Great. Patrice? Am I saying that?
Yeah, thank you very much. This presentation was really informative. I have a question about details on particularly the integrated research education grants, and yes, how you framed it for small liberal arts and PUIs. So I just want to make sure I understand. PUIs, people from SLACs and PUIs can still apply for the new investigator grants, but the integrated research education grant seems to be more fitting. And I'm assuming that you're kind of encouraging people from SLACs to go in that direction, but I'm a little confused on the invitation only component of that then, because it kind of sounds like if PUIs are primarily doing this integrated research part, then we can only apply through that. But then if it's invitation only, does that mean like my college has had to have a previously been funded, or like my lab specifically, and you re-invite that way? Could you just get some clarification on where SLACs kind of fall in the world of like the different types of grants, particularly as it pertains to the invitation only?
Sure. I just wanted to check. You said PUI?
Predominantly undergraduate institution.
Got it. Thank you.
Sorry, little schools that don't have grad, postdocs, grad students, all that stuff.
I'm totally with you. Got it. Yeah, so we have actually, just to address your question, we have had people apply to both new investigator and the IREG program, depending on sort of where their work and research has been. And then the Scientific Advisory Board has looked at some of those to see where they might be most, better fit and positioned. I will say that we are moving to be much more transparent and be able to publish for you all what is that rotation schedule. There are too many smaller PUI institutions to invite them all every year. So we've been trying to think about a way that makes sense and is ethical and responsible to rotate through that. And the criteria is varied. So there's a high priority on institutions that have never been invited and never applied. There's a goal of making sure to prioritize, a third this year, right, of institutions that have been invited and not applied, and then a third of the institutions that have been previous applicants put in a full proposal and not funded in that way too. So, and then some, maybe it's a quarter then of each of those, 25% of those will be those who have applied and been funded in the past. So we're trying to rotate through that. So I would welcome the opportunity to talk to you offline about your potential IREG interest, and let you know like what institutions we are getting ready or thinking about announcing this year to be invited.
Okay,
But you're also welcome to, again, we've had, I think even last year, Graham, we had someone apply to both IREG and new investigator. It really is sort of thinking about, which of the institutions, the faculty being able to share their level of meaningful undergraduate involvement in the research and others too. So, Graham, any thoughts on that?
I think that covers it. Yeah, I mean, I think that covers it. We're Mr. Kaufman was, interested, I think, in supporting the core basic research sort of initiatives and providing that spark, but I think also interested in the educational impact that the support can have. And so the SAB is always sort of mindful of that. And we try to be mindful that especially for the new investigator awards that come in, that for the LOIs, many may be from PUIs, and even though it's a new investigator, it's a new investigator proposal, the SAB is likely to look warmly if there is a component there that is also involving researchers from all sorts of different and a variety of a spectrum of career stages.
Yeah, Howard is on deck. Just one last comment is that we've certainly had faculty reach out to us that wanted to apply to IREG, but from really large institutions and who are doing a lot of undergraduate work and research. We, because of sort of the focus and the other funding opportunity through Kaufman and other resources, that's also factored in too. But, given that I'm a grants manager on this side, and your program officers, would encourage people to apply and make that case as well. And so just so, we're clear on some of the priorities, there's also lots of discussion and consideration that happens. Thank you, Patrice, for the question.
Thank you.
Yeah. Howard or Skip, excuse me.
Yes, yeah, Skip's how I go by. I want to make sure that the way we looked at structuring this. So I'm at Duquesne University. I'm an analytical and bioanalytical chemist. I work in medical research. My co-PI would be an MD here in Pennsylvania. And all of the patients we would be testing this new test on would be from Pennsylvania. I want to make sure that a private practitioner who has his own clinic would be acceptable as my co-PI. Could you speak to that, please? Hey, now he has a position at the university as a scholar in residence, but he's not paid by the university.
Yeah, I would think that would probably be on the fringe. And I can't think of any other examples where we've had just a practitioner sort of involved. And I'd also, just from your description, wonder how applied is the science that you're providing versus, is it fundamental chemistry, physics, or biology in the kind of work that you're doing as well? And if it is,
yes.
This is the kind of, request or that would be really novel and new in that way, and might push some of the boundaries for the scientific advisory board to consider. So generally it's 2 faculty appointments and primary appointments, not a physician in practice that has an adjunct or some, or an affiliation with an institution versus a primary appointment. Graham, can you think of any examples where we haven't had primary faculty?
Not off the top of my head.
Yeah. So I wouldn't, in many cases, and for the work that you all are doing in your fields, this is also an opportunity to, develop your R03 or R21 type applications or others. If it's something that you've been working on and you'd like to apply to Kaufman and see how the scientific advisory board would respond, would certainly encourage that. But that seems a little untraditional, I think, for how Kaufman has funded in the past. But would welcome and welcome the opportunity to talk to you offline as well, if you'd like.
I would like that. When I explain, you'll see why it's groundbreaking and very fundamental.
Okay.
Even though it sounds applied when I say there's an MD involved. It's creating home kits so we can keep track of people's health, which is not even used today. There's no other place doing it. So I'll talk to you offline on that.
Yeah, I'd welcome the chance to talk more. And again, our intention is to be much more inclusive and exclusive in this work as well. So that would be really exciting to share. So please, let's connect offline and feel free to email me or call anytime. Thank you, Skip. Bistra?
Thank you. Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Bistra. I'm assistant professor in bioengineering at the University of Pittsburgh. And I want to make sure I understand what new collaboration means. Specifically, are you talking about, say, two people that've never worked before, never published before, which is kind of the motto for some other grants? Are you talking about, say, existing collaborators that are now getting together to challenge a new topic that they've never published on before, or they've never worked together on, to sort of come together with sort of their complementary skill sets? And the reason why I'm asking is obliquely relates to what there was a question in the chat of how much preliminary data you expect, because obviously if we've never worked together with this human, it'll be very hard to acquire preliminary data, right? Thank you.
Great question. Graham, do you want to start with that? I have some thoughts too, but how the SAB looks at new initiative in that way.
Yeah. So the focus is not specifically on a new collaboration. It's on a new initiative, right? And so we have certainly reviewed proposals where there's been two investigators who have been working together previously. They may have published together. They may have had joint grants. But what they're proposing to do is a completely different question, a completely different topic, and that is considered to be eligible and appropriate. It is on the onus is on the investigators, the submitters of the proposal, to articulate that and make it clear. And so that's this meeting today is helpful, I think, in sort of clarifying some of these issues. You know, it's really there's a lot of credit, I think, given in the discussions for opening up new areas of science that wouldn't have otherwise happened other than for that collaboration. So that's where the emphasis is. And the idea that this process can spur those new collaborations and new areas of science, regardless of whether Kaufman funds them or not, and that will then lead, but the Kaufman funds really sort of can trigger that advancement in order to be competitive for other types of awards. So in terms of preliminary data, that I think the guidelines say very little about preliminary data because that's not the key focus. A really good idea and an interesting and exciting and a doable idea is what we're really looking for. Now, if you have some preliminary data that supports the feasibility, then that's sort of helpful. But these are not NIH or NSF grants, and they're not reviewed like NIH or NSF grants. And so it's helpful to kind of bear in mind that distinction and to go for that sort of novelty and that articulation of the novelty and why that science wouldn't have been done outside of this proposed new initiative is what I think really helps.
Yeah, and I would only add, thank you so much, Graham, is that if you're looking at sort of that established relationship and it's just taking a 5-degree turn, to help get through a bridge funding area, that's not so sexy or impactful, right? What if Mr. Kaufman were sitting right here, he would say, you've been working together, you've been doing great work together. Your preliminary data in that case is the history and the productivity of the work, but you've never been able to take that 90-degree turn as a collaboration and catapult the work into a new, really novel, impactful area. And I think that's what Mr. Kaufman would love to see, right? He wants to support everyone who's going to be a new Nobel laureate. That's what he's like, that was his sort of goal. And how can Kaufman really provide that flexible funding to do it? That said, it's not going to discourage people who met at a conference that have, integrated ideas and have never really had the opportunity within their institutions to work together because they don't have the time or resources to do that. And so, but if they have really, really well developed concept ideas that were developed on the back of napkins in a coffee shop, but just need the opportunity to work together, and this is how that would work, then I think that's equally as appealing in many ways as well. And so it's important that everyone recognize that you'll see in the language of the Kaufman Foundation, we like you to write these in ways that, lay people can read them. They're incredibly smart, awesome people reading these and are involved, but it's really in the LOI phase to capture very clearly the way that Graham described, that relationship and what the work is in science and why it's impactful, how it's going to make a difference. So this may push everyone to think a little bit differently on how we translate in language as well. So I hope that addresses your question. Great question.
Yes, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Dr. Yonas and Dr. Hatful, going off of that, we did have a question if we could elaborate on the note that competitive LOIs are written for an educated, scientific, generalist audience with a broad range of expertise. Would either of you speak a little more to that?
I'm gonna go find it. Let me.
I didn't see the question, but I can comment on what I think is the general topic.
It was a direct message. So just bring it to the broader group.
Oh, okay.
So let me briefly comment and then just please redirect if it's not helpful. So let me emphasize first of all that the SAB is a relatively small group, but it has folks whose primary expertise in physics and chemistry and biology. And when the SAB is reviewing an application, it's going to get reviewed by the entire board. So when you write that LOI or a full proposal, it should be at a level that can be understood and appreciated in terms of the overall goals and approaches by everyone on the SAB. So you're not looking to aim it at a first grader level. You're not looking to aim it to your sort of peer scientific people who work in the subgroup of what you work at. It has to make sense, but it has to be readable and understood as being exciting by scientifically literate audiences.
Yeah, I think that's really well stated, and I'll just be transparent. While it might have a biological sciences focus, a physicist is going to read it, but someone who's awesome and smart, strong, and they should be able to come away from that and say, I have kind of an understanding of what's going on in that black hole area, and or vice versa around planaria, and be able to describe what that looks like. So it's not that not peer-to-peer only. So same as Graham had described too. Any other questions from the group? This is our second year doing the webinar. We also always take the questions you put into the chat and make additions to our FAQ site. So to hopefully provide additional insight. If this was just not helpful at all, and you're like, I got some more questions, just please don't hesitate to reach out to myself and Emily. We can answer it. Just know, obviously exhibited by today, that we'll work with Graham and Christian and get answers to your questions as well. And that's what we're here for. So want to make sure to answer those and make sure that you get addressed. So and if there's anything else that you find that might be more helpful in the webinar as a process or information, or you've been on the best webinar somewhere else and you'd like to see that reflected here, we'd like to know how to do that to be better supportive of you too. And thanks for your awesome work. It's really exciting, and it's really a privilege for us to work and sort of advance Mr. Kaufman's goals. He's really remarkable. So we're incredibly indebted to his support and feel a lot of responsibility to follow through on his wishes. Graham or Christian or Emily, any final comments? Oh, I'm sorry,
just
questions.
yeah.
Yes. Amjad?
Can you hear me, please?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Hi, my name is Amjad Nazal. I'm an associate professor of physics from Wilkes University in East Pennsylvania. So, Mike, I think you kind of spoke about the issue I want to bring up, but I wasn't clear really on like the details. This is with regards to the collaborators that are out of state. So one of my collaborators, he's a Pennsylvania resident. He spent his entire career in Pennsylvania, and he's currently out of state, and he's coming back. So I don't know, would that disqualify if we include him as a collaborator, not as a PI? Would that disqualify an application?
Yeah, I mean, right now the guidelines are for Pennsylvania-based investigators. If he has an appointment that's been approved and coming back to the state of Pennsylvania, and by the time the application is going to be reviewed and or awarded, will be a faculty in the state of Pennsylvania, that would be fine. Those guidelines are pretty rigorous, right? That we also know people at joint appointments, but it's for investigators in the state of Pennsylvania. I know that's a tough one. Graham, any reflections on it? Yeah.
No, I just would say that I think maybe an additional way of thinking about it is that the Kaufman Foundation is not in a position to send money out of state. So, if there's a critical consultant type person or a sort of a collaborator who's just playing some kind of an intellectual role, but is somewhere else, then that's less of a concern than if part of the grant is proposed to fund some effort that happens in Columbus, Ohio, right? And so that's just another way of thinking about where the constraints are.
That's a super helpful clarification. Thank you, Graham. Yeah, because there may be that expertise somewhere else, but in terms of the core team, both here. Thank you for that, Graham. Jessica?
Hi, good morning. Jessica with Penn State College of Medicine. Thank you for the webinar. It's really insightful. I have two questions about the new initiative grant. My first question is there a preferred or most competitive faculty rank that you're looking at when you're awarding these? And then my second question is, does the foundation encourage applications from colleges of medicine?
I would say there is no preferred rank. It really is based on the science and capacity of both department and investigator and others, in that way. So that's not an eligibility criteria. And there is no ding if you're from a school of medicine, other than making sure to clarify that this is fundamental basic science research that aligns with the Kaufman guidelines. I would say that would be the case. So there's no, there are people appointed in different places that are doing all kinds of things. So it's really about making sure to align with the guidelines as well. Something else that I'm glad you just sparked thought of mine is that the letters of support that come in with these, if you're invited for a full proposal, are really critical to the work. A department chair letter of support's, like, of course they have to write something really strong, but someone who's been in interdisciplinary, that's been working in this area, can comment on the research, and others, that's not someone who's obligated to put in a letter of support that is, glowing. Often the whole breadth of the application are very highly ranked by the scientific advisory board. So it's really a balance all those areas as well. So for those, who, and no one here would ever do this, but if you write your letter of support and send it to someone and they send a letter of support back that has one changed line to it, that's a little less appealing than someone, I think, really who can speak to the science, impact of the science, and role moving forward. But institution and or rank are not a criteria breaker, but I would say that the new initiative awards are generally more for more seasoned people in the field. But that's, I think, up to the applicant or the LOI initially to make that argument. Graham, anything to share?
So no, I think that's certainly fair about rank. So the thing about the new initiatives is that you're looking for these new directions, right? And so it sort of helps if the collaborators have some established role in their, let's call it their sort of core activities, right? And so that's not normally to be seen in a starting assistant professor. It's more common to see it in an associate or a full professor, but it's certainly you can see it in a more advanced assistant professor as well. So I don't know if that adds some clarification. In terms of departmental affiliation, yes, I agree with very much with Michael. It's no, you can certainly, lots of people in departments of medicine, I think, do fundamental core basic research. That distinction between whether it is fundamental research or whether it's applied or clinical is looked at with considerable scrutiny by all members of the scientific advisory board, and so that's pretty important, right? And I think Kaufman Foundation has funded lots of research which is certainly relevant and pertinent to human health, but it's not going to fund clinical trials. And the closer it is to the medicine rather than the biology, the less likely it's going to be competitive at that level is, I think, maybe a helpful way of looking at it. And again, it's important to try to understand some of these emphasis and priorities, because whatever you can do to clarify those in an LOI or a proposal is very helpful. You can don't shirk from spelling it out in plain language so that the SAB universally can understand the perspective that it's coming from.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Graham, for clarifying, and Jessica for the question too. And if you do have questions as you're working on this, or you think you'd like to reach out more, happy to talk with you more about some of those distinctions. My default often will be, if there's really a gray area, is to say apply, right? And sort of see how that discussion goes. We do provide comments back, very high level comments on some of the review processes and others that Christian will be helping with most directly. And so hopefully those will be helpful as well when they go through the process. It is competitive, but it's also meant to be as supportive and inclusive as we can. Some of this is also based on Mr. Kaufman's recognition that there are so many other resources out there for more applied sciences in many cases in a variety of ways. And so this is really trying to be as a little more of a less of a mile wide and an inch deep, and much more sort of a little more focused on how to really help cultivate a space that has really seen decreases in funding nationally over time. So we'll see. And I think, Emily, did you have a question that came up? It came off.
Yeah, there was one more question. We have about 5 minutes left, so I think we have enough time to answer it. But the investigator was asking if we could provide a couple of more details on the review process. This is from someone who's thinking about resubmitting an LOI that they've submitted in the past.
Yeah, so generally the Scientific Advisory Board, as Graham mentioned, and you can find their bios and information on the Pittsburgh Foundation website if you Google us. They're the same Scientific Advisory Board that's been in place for many years and have a phenomenal capacity for both understanding each other's disciplines and incredible expertise, but also incredible humility in terms of sort of deferential understanding of each other's understandings of the research that's being submitted. The process is rigorous. It goes through both an LOI with a primary round of review, and then the full applications are reviewed by multiple members of the board, and there's a broad group discussion on every single proposal that comes forward. So it's rigorous and clear, and about an 8-hour review process. And the audience would be that Scientific Advisory Board, keeping in line the guidelines around still making sure that this information doesn't require the board to do too much Googling around language and understanding, but to really understand what you've been submitting and why it's relevant and important in that way, while also recognizing that there will be content experts on that review process as well. They might not be the primary reviewer, but certainly secondary or third reviewer, but then the whole board discusses those grant reviews as well. Graham, anything to share?
I would just to remind everyone that it's a quite a heavily competitive process, and the system is structured in order to make the LOI level relatively simple, relatively little investment of time and effort with basically a one-page proposal. That's the goal. The proportion of those that move forward to the full proposal is, as we've said before, is relatively small proportion, but the whole point is it's relatively simple to do that. And then when you do a full proposal, it's like a 5-page proposal. It is not a 25-page proposal. Requires a little bit more work, but there's a much higher chance of funding at that level. We do try to provide comments back to investigators when for those that request them, as best as possible to reflect the sort of broad sentiments of the SAB discussion. And so those comments are important to address, but it's helpful you need to understand that once you've addressed them and resubmit, if that's what you choose to do, that it remains a competitive process, and you're competing with a different set of proposals than were there last year or the year before when you applied. And so we hope that the process of submitting applications is not too onerous, that it's worthwhile the time and effort given the prospects for funding, and try to hit all the high points to submit as a competitive proposal along the lines of all the topics that we've been discussing.
Yeah. I mean, it may be worth, as you're looking to resubmit, if some of the comments were about translating the science in a way that was, attainable, you may want to have a colleague from a different discipline take a look at your proposal before you submit it, or have someone else in that way too, and buy them a cup of coffee. So we're happy to answer any questions also as you apply, and have any sort of detailed questions as well. It does go, there's a barrier between what I provide and information. We're always extremely conscious of conflict of interest practices and hold those at the highest level of regard. And we're really clear about that, declaring all those conflicts all throughout the process, and making sure that people are recused from any comment on that. They may provide some content expertise, but never part of the review process as well. So that's super important. It is 10:59. Want to be respectful of all of your time. It's a privilege to be able to connect with you all and also put some faces to names. Please don't hesitate to reach out as we go through this process. Emily will be the primary contact. You'll see her email in a lot of different ways. Christian, Emily, and I are here to provide that direct support as you need in any way moving forward. Graham, thank you so much for your comments today and your leadership of the Scientific Advisory Board. And it's a privilege to be with you. Thank you.